Richard Crane, Evergreen Sustainability Alliance. I've reached out to the county commissioners, and based on Daryl's YouTube thing that I listened to, I thought, man, this is crazy. Lived down Stagecoach and noticed that they were expanding the parking lot by about 3 times. And so I thought, wow, what is going on? So I've reached out to all of them. Andy Kerr and Leslie Dahlkamper said that they would love to walk the land with us. And, I'm gonna set that up the 1st of November, and, whoever would like to come, I think it would be a great show of force, but it would also be an education to see exactly what they're gonna do. So I'll somehow we'll get emails and connected and take it from there.
Hi, I'm Dick Swain, resident on Horseshoe Drive, right abutting Three Sisters Park. So we got 16 acres there, and I go right along the side of the park. That part of the park, they really haven't cut much where I am because it's steep up there. But I walk that land all the time. We're doing fire mitigation right now on my property. But I get to walk up there a lot. And it's really, what's disturbing me, I'm more of a one-issue person in this case, maybe 2 issues, but one of them is there's a lot of cutting of culturally modified trees. These are trees that were modified by the Ute Indians. They're 175 years old, 100 to 175 years old. Maybe some of them are a little bit longer. On our property, we've got at least 25 trees that are significant. And over on the Three Sisters side, they cut them indiscriminately. They never, as far as I know, they didn't do any inventory of those trees. They just cut them. They didn't really know what they were looking at. When I've talked to rangers and park rangers and things like that, they say, oh, go talk to the commissioners. And so they didn't give me any double talk, they just didn't have any real answers on it. So there's an interesting book I've got here, and if you guys want to see it at the end of the night, you can see what those trees look like. Yeah, it's Native American prayer trees of Colorado. We've had them up on our property. They folks that really know a lot more than I do about these things, but you want to come to our property and see them. There's pretty interesting trees that were put together by the Indians. The other issue that I've got too is that by cutting all by those wide swaths that they cut on, to make it possible for those machines to go through. It's really hot up there now. It's so hot. It's like it doesn't feel comfortable to walk anymore. And honestly, I don't see the birds and the other animals at this moment.
I'm a retired hospice nurse from Evergreen. I've lived here 48 years. I've been in a hiking club for 15 years. Every Saturday, we've gone to Three Sisters. That's my sanity away from being a hospice nurse and a political activist. And when we discovered the clear cutting that had been done, and I will never go back there. And I actually said that to Commissioner Kerr, and he walked away when I said that. I said, I will never go back there. I raised my kids here. They went to high school here. When our family came here, we went to Three Sisters. My friend lives on the Masters. It's the most healing thing to be with my hiking club and my sanity, and it's gone.
Hey there, Amy and Chris, we actually live adjacent to Elk Meadow and have been watching as they've been cutting down trees there, and the next tranche of trees that they're cutting in Elk Meadow is actually in a meadow. Surprise, surprise. And having seen what happened at Three Sisters, I'm extremely concerned that when they drive heavy machinery through this meadow, it will dry up, and it's already really dry. I mean, it hasn't rained in a long, long time. So when the meadow dries up more, I think of Marshall Fire, and I think of what will happen to my house when that meadow starts to burn, even though there are no trees, and what kind of property value implications that has for us, as well as safety. And in the meantime, you know, we are trying to do the defensible space maintenance and trying to work with our HOA in order to manage the shared lands, but we don't, as you know, have enough funding to do that. It's so many thousands of dollars for every tree that they have to cut down in order to maintain egress. And so I really, you know, would love to have some input on the plan that's developed, the implementation of the plan, and make sure that JeffCo is accountable. They're public servants, that we pay them. We're paying for this, so we need to have some input as to how it goes about and the implications that it has to all of us who are living in the area, as well as, you know, the people that come up and utilize these spaces as well. So I'd really just love to have, as you said, them stop doing the cutting so that we have a minute to think about what the plan is, to make sure the science is incorporated and that people are accountable and have received input from the people it matters to and the people it's going to impact. Thank you.
I'm a lifelong Democrat. I've never voted for Republican in my entire life. Maybe the closest I could come would be to not vote. But at one point I got them both, Leslie and Andy, standing right next to each other. And I ran up there and I said, "Do you guys want to get reelected?" And they dropped jaws, I swear. You know, like, it never dawned on us, no, we couldn't get reelected. You know, I don't know what to say about that. I'm not sure I can vote for Republican, but maybe I can not vote. But they need to be scared, and they need to know that there's a possibility that they could not get reelected, because that might do it if they just knew that that's a possibility.
I'm of course concerned about the loss of the trees, but the biggest issue to me is the mastication.
Yeah.
I hiked a trail that 40 years ago had that done up in Summit County, and it still looks like that today. And I recently went back to Flying J, which I have avoided ever since they did that travesty. And there's some baby trees coming up in one section where it was a little thinner, but there's huge swaths that are just never going to come back, that are just dead now. Those sticks will never degrade. We are not wet enough in Colorado for those sticks to ever rot and turn into enhancements to the soil. They are simply going to be there as complete ugliness forever. Not to mention that mastication is flammable. If I left that kind of slash in my yard, my insurance company would cancel me immediately. You all know, you have insurance, you've seen the same thing. You cannot leave sticks like that. The idea that the county would do something that they claim is for fire safety, that is highly flammable, is just appalling to me. And I asked people who are involved in that to say, if I piled those sticks in your yard and stood there with a cigarette, how quickly would you decide that that's flammable? Thank you.
My name is Evelyn and I live at Three Sisters, and they did use the mastification and just ran through it. They did not mark trees. I have video of it from years ago because I was absolutely furious. And then they left all the logs on the ground. And they had did it 10 years previously, and you can see no change whatsoever. My friend and I drove to Boulder one night to see a film, and it's called Elemental Reimagined. You probably know about this film. And they've proven it does not work. It's best to harden your house with a metal roof and siding, cement siding. So what the government's doing is not helping any one of us. They're just setting us up for fires. So I encourage every single one of you then to write to your council member and tell them what we're under, because one day they're gonna cancel our insurance. I have State Farm now, but if we're all with State Farm, one day they're probably gonna drive the prices double, or they're gonna cancel us all. The government said there's some stopgap insurance, but what is that, for a year or two? We don't wanna be like Florida now, where we don't have any insurance whatsoever. And as she said, I'm not seeing the animals, I'm not seeing the birds, and I've had personal trees come down that I had to pay to get out because the wind came through, because of the way they cut the trees. So I pray all of you help, because we're all in this together. And as you said, we're gonna lose more parks if it continues.
Is there any members of the media in this room tonight? Okay, so I used to work for the media. I just want you to know that I've been sending press releases to media for about 4 years, and they almost never cover this. and they chose not to come to this tonight. So we have to figure out what's going on with why doesn't the media even want to report on, let's say they don't understand the science. Okay, write down the fact that a bunch of people were in a room, talking to each other. That's a story. They're not covering it. What's going on?
In this area, hiking for 16 years, and I have sat down and cried at some of these areas. I want to thank Josh and those of you organizing this, because I actually work in land restoration and understanding how land management affects the water cycle and induces drought if it's not, depending on how it's done and how it is typically done. I'm connected with and know there's an international team of scientists that are also trying to get their voices heard, but I didn't have local information. And so by myself, I felt like a lone voice, what should I do or what could I do? So I'm very thankful also to hear all of the voices here that have pointed to the things we know. We don't need the science to tell us this impacts wildlife, this impacts birds, it dries out the soil, it increases the heat, plants cool, the equipment compacts the soil and the water runs off, it impacts our groundwater, the trees, and the root systems actually create spongy soils, and they actually manage and help manage water. So touching on that, there is science. I appreciate, Josh, what you presented, because I didn't have some of the local science, but we know this in our hearts already. I did meet with the Denver Mountain Parks folks because they're getting ready to chop down Stanley Park. And they say they're listening and they're doing less, but I looked at the scope of work, and he told me, he said, if we don't cut down a certain number of trees, we don't get covered by the grant, and if you're concerned, you've got to talk to the grant folks. So I do need to name also that the way grants work, right, there's a lot of federal money driving this too. And those folks, like the Denver Mountain Parks guys, actually, I started out by pushing the buttons about the logging, and then I backed off and I said, I'm going to talk from what I know, from the soil. And I had a conversation where he started listening, like, you guys bringing equipment in, you're going to impact wildlife. But I want to name, they're not doing environmental impacts. They don't have to do that. I don't think Jefferson County does as well. But I did have a nice conversation. He asked me for more information on soil impacts. I can provide that. I don't have the local stuff. I'm going to look deeper at what Josh has. But he did say, that we don't take all the grants, but this is being driven at a bigger level. So money is driving this, and they believe what they're doing is right because they're educated ultimately by the logging companies. Right. I feel like that's part of it. Like, they believe what they're doing is right. So how do we get the word out? But as Josh said, it's also frustrating because this science should be an open discussion. It's not fact. There are different opinions, but only one side is people are only being educated based on one side, and a lot of people believe that the fire mitigation stuff they're being told is helpful.
Yes.
And you see even around properties that too much fire mitigation and clearing, the debris on the ground wood on the ground is actually like a water sponge that holds in moisture, and we're just clearing. Anyway, I think my time is up. But I, again, want to thank you. This is so important to just see other people here that care and know that maybe we can make a difference together.
My name is David Lystrom. I've lived in Evergreen for about 43 years. I retired 25 years ago from the U.S. Geological Survey. I was a hydrologist. At any rate, our motto was science for a changing world. And we definitely have a changing world. But I don't see any science going into this thinning of our parks. And I'm appalled that there isn't really any kind of a white paper that describes what they're doing, why they're doing it, and which trees are gonna save it seems like they're just turning it over to the logging companies, say, have at it.
Yeah.
That's not what we want for our parks at all. I've hiked these trails for 43 years with my kids and now my grandkids. And when I went back to Three Sisters, I was appalled, I really was. But Flying J is actually much worse. I was on the board of directors with Richard Crane with the Evergreen Sustainability Alliance. And Richard mentioned you're going to have a meeting with county commissioners, is that right?
Yeah, Andy and Leslie said they'd walk the land with us.
Oh, that's fabulous. What day is that, and can we be out there with you?
Absolutely, I haven't nailed it down, so I'm gonna have to pull together some emails and I'll fire it out as soon as I know.
Great, I'm definitely gonna be there. I retired from that board as well,
We miss you.
but I made it home. Anyone else?
It would be great to have a whole bunch of people show
Yeah.
up. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tammy Story. I'm the state representative for this area. My district is the JeffCo foothills south of I-70. So it's the western boundary that's up against Clear Creek and Clear Creek and Park County. And then eastern boundary is more or less C-470, and it runs all the way to the southern tip of JeffCo. And also have a portion of unincorporated Littleton around the Chatfield High School articulation area on the inside of C-470. Just to give you some perspective. So I've lived up here for 37 years. I have walked all of these parks that have been mentioned today. I've been in the open space parks with my kids as they were growing up. They were born and raised here. I know all the trails too. I'm very familiar with what's happening now, and I feel very much the way many of you do as well. That the parks are being devastated, that the action that's being taken is not to the benefit of the forest, it's not to the benefit of the wildlife, it's not to the benefit of our water resources, and that it's highly detrimental. So I appreciate that all of you have come out and that you're gathering together. Community really does make a difference. I'm glad that there are some county officials here, open space officials, that are listening and hearing the conversation. I think it's important that your voice be heard. It's necessary, and the community really can move and help make decisions that benefit better the community. And I think it's important to also have the science behind, of course, our feelings and our emotions and our ties to the land, whatever they might be, as informal as it might be. I think it's also important to have the science on our side, and I think there is that, and I think more needs to be brought to bear to help sort of turn the tide. So I just want you to know that I do represent you, but this also is at a county level, but I'm also happy to do some outreach to our federal level to see what the impacts are there and what might be guiding the funding and how that all works. So I will do what I can to help provide that information and make those connections and help the process along. So feel free to reach out to me. I will sign in to the sheet over there, but I'm happy to share my contact information, but you can find it on the General Assembly website. My name's Tammy Story like book. You can just Google my name, and the website for General Assembly will pop up, and there's an email there where you can reach out to me. So appreciate all of you being here and your passion and your interest for wanting to address this issue because for all the reasons you said.
I just had a question. There's a lot of discussion about Elk Meadow Park, and I wonder if anybody knows how far up to Bergen Peak they're cutting, because it stops being JeffCo open space and becomes Denver Mountain Parks, and then part of the state wildlife area, and I don't know where they intend to stop, and I wonder if there's anybody here that knows about that. And that I hike that Stagecoach Trail
Yeah.
2 or 3 days a week, and I still hike from Elk Meadow up to Bergen Peak 2 or 3 days a
I
week.
think if you go in the JeffCo open space, you'll see what they're gonna be, clear cutting or trimming, mitigating, whatever you wanna call it, but, it seems like it goes up pretty far away, so I don't know what the collaboration is.
Yeah, well, I guess that's my question. Are they collaborating with Denver Mountain Parks? I heard somebody
Yeah,
mention
I
that.
don't know.
Okay.
Good
But I'll be
question.
there on the 1st.
Okay, cool.
Hi folks, I'm just a resident of Golden that comes up here frequently to enjoy your beautiful community and the forest, and have been aghast, as many of you mentioned, to see what's happened to our trees and the wildlife and the number of birds that you're able to see. And we're transplants from California, but where it's increasingly people are talking about trying to engage native populations and mimic the way native populations would manage forest fires by basically brush burning and getting rid of a lot of these fuels in a way that have been practiced for hundreds of years. And when we walked through Three Sisters and see all this fuel that clearly there's no microbiome, there's no bugs basically sitting there chewing down all of this wood that people are talking about staying on the ground for years, decades, and that it's just really too dry and not wet enough to process all of this biomass that's basically just going to be future fuel. And then you look at these big, beautiful trees that they left behind, and after a couple of weeks of wind, they're falling over. And so even the ones that weren't cut are being, are being lost due to wind and not having the strength to stay in the soil. And you wonder what kind of runoff situation is going to happen, because that's a huge thing in California, where you would have a really hot fire burn through there, and then just tons of soil and mudslides and things such as that, pouring into the creeks and causing houses to fall off the hillsides. And so it seems shocking that really there wasn't a study made public to people, like some kind of environmental impact that says, hey, we know that if we did small burns versus this kind of clear cutting activity versus a control plot, that which one of these works best in this particular area? How come that wasn't really made public? And when you looked and saw piles and piles and piles of logs, you're like, who's buying these logs?
Yes.
Who's profiting from these logs?
Yeah, that's what
And
I'm saying.
what's happening with that? Is that going to help the owners who are gonna be hardened or not? Where's that money going? So, I don't know, I mainly came here just to listen and try to get together some ideas and potentially start digging into studies. I'm a veterinarian. I too have witnessed that the animal situations, you see a lot of very furtive, freaked out deer that are kind of like, I have no place to hide, whatever. It's very concerning what's happening, and unfortunately we just don't have that much wilderness left to do this experiment and say, wow, that 1,000 acres, I guess that was a mistake, or that 40,000 acres. And they're doing it on our tax dollars. So thank you so much for bringing up all of these issues, and I really hope to learn a lot more. And we're gonna take this to these meetings and make some noise. I think this is very important, what you guys are doing. Thank you.
We had a meeting with Andy about South Park and this Parkland up there. And they did come out to their credit and walk through with us, but I'm not sure that that's the place to go that will be most effective. They believe that they're doing the right thing. They did not believe that prayer trees were really prayer trees. As a matter of fact, they kind of chuckled over that. They told me that the forest was sick, that I was looking at, even though in the 80 acres I could see one dead tree. They listened, but it was all signed, sealed, and delivered. And so I want us to go up the chain far enough that we can make a difference. They told us that the fir trees were crowding out the ponderosa, and that's why the fir trees thrived in shade, and that they needed to be taken out so that the ponderosa could thrive. But the slope that they were discussing this about was north facing. And it was my understanding that Ponderosa thrive on south facing. So I'm thinking, well, maybe that's why they're not thriving, is this isn't where they thrive. But anyway, that's just mostly so you know what discussion points to think about and how you're gonna handle it. But they also mentioned grant money, so I think that they feel like these are just wasted dollars hanging there if they don't use it. So
Take down all of our trees.
so I think that we need to go higher up the chain. I was glad to hear Tammy say what she said about going after who's funding some of this. I don't know where all the money's coming from. Definitely grants, but other than that, don't know.
I don't know who's actually doing the cutting. Who is it?
What company?
I was told that they had a hard time finding some company that wanted to do it. And I keep wondering if the money from the logging isn't just going to pay, you know, the companies. I mean, where is all, lumber's worth a lot. Where is all that,
Home Depot's expensive.
where is all that money going from the sale?
JeffCo does some of the tree cutting themselves, okay, and then also some contractors, I believe, do. Okay.
I'm Anna Wilson. I wasn't going to speak, I was just going to listen. But I've been here for 41 years, pretty close to all the three sisters. My husband probably walks there, or did, before the devastation, at least 4 times a week. So he was always over there. And when they did the little mini cutting, kind of just off the main upper meadow, he talked to JeffCo, Open Space, and registered concern. And yet those trees sat on the ground there for, I think it's been a decade now, pretty close. They have recently cleaned that up, kind of in the other process of devastating the rest of the park. As for the rest of the park, I have heard secondhand that there was a model that the JeffCo Open Space used to decide how many trees had to be cleared. And so the contractor or whoever cleared those trees, but they didn't account for the shallow root system. And so we lost a whole lot more trees than were planned for. My other thought is I'm really into native plants. I have been walking in the park a couple of times because I can't bring myself to go there more than once a week or every other week. The weed infestation is out of control. The non-natives that have come in since the logging is really scary. So I will leave it with that.
I'll say this, on the last bout where they chopped all these trees down about 2 years ago and they left all this slash around Buffalo Park, nobody reacted to it at all, and by the just sheer luck, I found the state fire marshal over on Meadow Drive dealing with the Elephant Butte fire. And I approached her and she said, take me over there. Because there were just humongous piles of slash that these people left right by the roadside within an easy, cigarette flick of the highway. It's unconscionable to me that somebody could do something like that and ignore all the pleas from the people that live there and who would obviously, be affected by a devastating fire. And again, it was the state fire marshal. She reacted immediately. And in about a week and a half, the stuff was gone. Now that's reaction.
We should have to,
yeah.
let's call the fire marshals and get them out there to see that stuff in the parks.
Okay, well, I guess we'll adjourn. Thanks again for coming out here. Sure. These are your parks.